This is the plaintiff, Renee Manuel. He says the defendant, one of her best friends, drove her car without permission, damaged her ignition system, and won't pay to have it repaired. Her car was mishandled by the defendant. They've stopped speaking since, and best friend or no best friend, she wants her $711.85, so she's suing. This is the defendant, Kim Thomas. She says the plaintiff went into rehab and asked her to pick up her car and store it in her garage, which she did for her good friend. When the plaintiff got out, the car wouldn't start, and now the woman suing her for the repair? Is she serious? Bottom line, they're friends no more. She's accused of fouling up a friendship.
All parties, please use your right hands.
Welcome back to the People's Court. Next case on the docket. These litigants were best friends until the plaintiff says the defendant drove her car, damaged it, and won't pay. But the defendant says she was caring for the car while the plaintiff was in rehab, so the nerve. It's the case of the friendship that went cold turkey.
Thank you, Douglas. Renee Manuel, you are suing Kim Thomas, your former friend, for $711 in pain and suffering and the cost to repair a car ignition that, according to you, she broke. What happened?
Your Honor, in September, I went to a detox to recover from a drug habit, and from the detox, they were taking me to a program, but I drove myself to the detox, and I couldn't leave my car parked there. Ms. Thomas offered to pick up my car and park it in her garage until I got out.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Good.
I'm doing very well.
Good. So how long were you in detox?
I was there for a few weeks.
So for those few weeks, she has your car?
She was supposed to park it in her garage until I came back home.
Did you ever give her permission to use it?
No.
And apparently, according to you, she was using it?
Yes.
Now, according to you, you weren't using it. You were just driving it to where she was going to pick it up?
The car.
Or what?
I came in contact with the car when she asked me to come to take her car from where she was, park it in my garage because they were taking her somewhere else.
Okay. And you two were friends?
Yeah. So I was
Good
doing
friends?
I was doing her a favor,
Right.
parking it in my garage.
Right.
So when I went and got it, I parked it in the garage. She then called me a couple of days later and asked me to drive the car to her so that she could get something out of the car.
Did you do that?
I did that, and when I was on my way back
Is that
home.
accurate?
Yes.
Oh,
And on my
I
way
guess
back
you're
home,
telling her to drive it. Okay, go
I
ahead.
stopped at my client's house, and when I stopped to drop it, the old lady I take care of, the elderly lady I take care of, the car wouldn't start back up. So I left the car there overnight, and I went home. The next day I came back for it. I was going to arrange to get it towed back to my garage, where she asked me to park it, and then she came home. So once
That same day?
Yeah. Once she came home, it was like...
Did you expect her home that day?
No.
So did you leave early?
Yes, I did.
So how do you get the car in your possession again?
When I leave from the facility, they drop me off, and I had to be dropped off where my car was at her place of employment.
So at some way, half the way there, you realize her place of employment is where her car was?
Yes.
Not at her house?
No.
How did you know the car was at her place of employment?
Because I was calling Miss Thomas to call her and ask her to come pick me up in my car, but I could get no answer. Then she finally called me back and said she was trying to get my car started. And I'm like, what do you mean trying to get my car started? So I said, where are you? And she told me she was at her place of employment. So I had the people from the facility drop me off to my car. And then I tried to start the car. The key would not turn in the ignition. So then I then called AAA because I have AAA, and I had to have my car towed to my mechanic, which at that point...
So you needed a new ignition. Why is that her fault?
Because there was nothing wrong with my car, and she was not even supposed to be driving my car at all, except for the one time I called her to meet me down.
And the other time you called her to pick you up. But, okay, I understand that. And according to you, why are you driving her car?
Okay. You guys friends?
We are friends.
Okay,
yeah.
suppose you loan him your car and it's an old car, and when you're driving it, it breaks down. Is he responsible for paying for the repair?
I would say absolutely not. If there was a problem with the car and he just happened to be driving it, he shouldn't be responsible for
Well,
it.
I'm guessing then you would say absolutely not too, right?
Absolutely not.
Yeah. Good move, going inside the courtroom.
I drove her car to her. She asked me to drive the car down so she can get something out of it.
Yeah,
So
but
that's
then...
why I was back in her car again. She said she was going to be at the courthouse. Asked me to drive her car down to her where she was going to be so she can get something out of her car.
Then she gets something out of her car.
And I was going back home. On my way back home, I stopped at my client's house to check on her.
And that's the day she leaves?
She left the next day. The car was parked in front of my client's house.
Because what?
I couldn't get the key to turn in
The day,
ignition.
the prior day.
Right, that same day.
Well,
that I
either
came
way,
out.
let me just ask you, even assuming, let's assume that she does a bad thing, which is drive the car without your authorization. How does that mean that she broke the ignition? What year car is this?
2005.
Okay, so
Chevy
it's an
Impala.
11-year-old car. Maybe the ignition just broke, you know? What is it she did to break it?
I had no problem with
Yeah,
my
I
ignition.
know. We all have no problem with the ignition till the ignition breaks. And then that magical moment when the ignition breaks, we have a problem with the ignition. So what did she do to break your ignition?
Well, had she not been driving the car, I wouldn't even be...
Then you would have turned on the car and the key would
But
have
it would be my fault, and I would have to pay for it.
The person who goes like this isn't at fault. She has to have done something to break your ignition. Why are you suing for pain and suffering?
Miss Thomas, she just left me high and dry. I'm coming out of this facility with luggage and everything, and I'm stuck at the mechanics. I'm in the mechanic's office. You know, I had a breakdown. I had an asthma attack. I was so upset. The mechanic then had to drive me with my luggage and my bags to someone, you know, to my friend's house. I mean, you know, there was just no support there from her at all. She messed up my car and then just left me high and dry.
Does she ever come to... Why are you smiling?
Because she's lying.
So...
Because when the tow truck came for her vehicle, myself and my boyfriend followed the car and her to the mechanic. We asked her if she was straight before we left her. She said she was fine, so we went home. So I don't understand
So when's the
how
first
I
time
left
she
her.
says, hey, it's $211 and I want you to pay for it? When is the first time she says that?
After she, the next day when she was saying that the guy had to take everything apart and put it back together, she tells me I owe her $211. Like, why? Your car was already messed up before I started driving it.
And then she says...
She tells me, no, I'm responsible for it. And I told her I'm not.
How long were you guys friends?
For a couple of years. I mean, I used to do things for her all the time.
You miss each other?
Not really. Not if it's going to bring me drama, no. I mean, if you're trying to get money out of me for something I didn't do.
Yeah.
I mean, I parked her car in my garage for a month, never charged her.
Yeah.
Even doing this favor for her, I wasn't charging her to
All right,
park
Ms.
it.
Thomas is right. Legally speaking, she doesn't owe you for the car ignition, and certainly not for pain and suffering. We can't sue each other because friends don't end up being, in our estimation, good friends. That's not a cause of action. Unless you can show that she, like, you know, did something to the ignition to break it. Just the fact that it breaks while it's in her possession, it's an 11-year-old car, that doesn't mean that she did something to it. And it doesn't turn on whether or not she's driving it without authority or driving it with authority. It doesn't matter. As long as you're driving it the way a car is to be driven and you don't jam something in it, you know, you're not trying to break, you know, it's just one of those things. So who has to pay for it is not going to fortuitously fall on the coincidence of who happens to try to turn it for the first time when it failed. That's not how it works. My verdict in this case is for the defendant.
Well, the plaintiff can't prove her case. The defendant prevails. You don't get the $700 back that you were suing for. Sounds like you lost a friendship here, too. You had a friendship going, and it's gone, right? You understand the judge's decision?
It is what it is.
I mean, do you understand what she said? You couldn't prove that she's responsible for your ignition not
She had
working.
no business driving my car, but the judge's verdict
Well, she
is
said she
what it
wasn't,
is.
except going to pick you up.
No,
So,
no. My car was parked in front of her place of employment.
that's what she said.
Yeah. But it shouldn't have been there. It should have been in her garage.
Well, sorry.
Thank you.
If you listened carefully, you would have understood why. It's all that way. Here comes Kim Thomas. She's the defendant. We heard everything. Obviously, I think everybody agrees. You're not on the hook for it.
No, not on the hook. Trying to do a favor. Trying to get screwed.
Yeah, sounds like you were. And you stored it for a month?
I stored it for a month.
How about that?
And didn't charge her.
She doesn't seem to be appreciative
Appreciative
of that.
at all.
Right.
No, not at all.
Okay. Well, listen, congratulations. Thank you very much. Okay. Harvey, how about that?
Well, I mean, look, Doug, the plaintiff has the burden of proving the defendant did something negligent to cause the damage to the car. You have to show negligence. If you don't, you lose. And in this case, the plaintiff couldn't.